Good morning and welcome along to Anglesey Circuit on Alpha Live and 750 Motor Club TV for the first of 2 days of racing on the international circuit for the first time for the 750 Motor Club. And as you can see, it is me, Joshua Barrett, alongside Johnny Palmer for the weekend here at Anglesey, and we are on the international circuit, as I say, which is a 2.1 mile circuit which was established a few decades ago now, although this particular layout is a little bit newer, which has 9 turns. As I say, a new layout for the 750 Motor Club on a glorious day here in North Wales. It's sunny, it's going to be hopefully sunny for the rest of the day as well, and pretty warm as well, so that's a great time to come to North Wales. And as you can see, Snowdonia in the background, so a perfect location for a race weekend where we welcome Johnny Palmer back to the 750 Motor Club booth.
It's wonderful to be here, Josh. Really pleased to have been invited, and also the fact that Anglesey has really turned on the weather for this weekend. I couldn't quite believe, as I was driving through, that that's slightly better, isn't it? You can hear me now. As I was driving through, well, across the top on the A55, and you've got Conway, you've got Colwyn Bay, you've got Bangor, and I thought the weather's getting better and better and better. And then you arrive here, and this is almost like the end of the rainbow, if you like. There was no rain to drive through. And as you say, it's going to be like this, I think, all day. You have possibly put the kibosh on it for tomorrow because, well, you described it to me earlier on. There's a question mark over tomorrow. That's a multitude of sins for me. I don't quite know what to expect when we turn up on Sunday. But I'm really looking forward to the 8 races that we've got across many different categories. 2 of them this side of the lunch break, and then we get really stuck in to non-stop racing pretty much for the whole of the afternoon, Josh.
Yeah, it's a very sports car type feel, so we thought we needed a sports car expert with you, Johnny, and with Andy McEwen, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later on. So this morning we will have races for the 750 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship, so for bike-engined sports cars, and for the Yokohama Mazda Steven Championship, so kit car style racing with the low cost with the Mazda MX-5 engine. So that's to come up prior to lunch here at Anglesey. And then this afternoon we will be joined by the Tigoa Road Sports Series, which is a 45-minute race for production sports and touring cars. We have the Mighty Minis Championship, so sort of our non-sports car series, and we'll be welcoming Craig Cook, Mighty Mini commentator, to the box for that one. Yokohama Low Cost Championship, so the traditional low cost championship with the Ford Crossflow engines. The 5-club race in Mazda MX-5 Cup for the Mazda MX-5 Mark I. We'll see the second race for the bike sports, and then a very large grid for the Calm All Porsche Trophy will end off today's action. They are the cars you can currently see on the circuit, and they are, as the championships or the series name suggests, all Porsches, and a great variety of Porsches. We've got front-engined and rear-engined cars on about a 30-car grid. Yeah, 30 cars in total, I think, currently on the circuit here. So a great programme, as you were saying, Johnny, in prospect.
Yeah, I like the mixture of, obviously you've got that longer race for the Tigoa Road Sports at 45 minutes. There's going to be a driver change in that as well, and obviously a mandatory pit stop in order to do that. So a little bit of strategy, which I'm a big fan of, as you may well know. But I also enjoy some proper sprint racing as well over 15 minutes, and we've got several of those too. I was trying to remember the last time I was here at Anglesey, and I think it was year before last when I was working with a guy called Paul O'Neill.
Who's that?
I don't know whether you know, but he's an absolute clown. So it's just nice to be working with somebody sensible for once. And Joshua Barrett and Andy McEwen are definitely put under that category. So we'll be hearing from Andy a little bit later on with post-race interviews and podiums.
It's nice to share a commentary box with you, Johnny, because I don't think we've done that before.
Well, I was trying to remember, at Pembrey last year, we were in the same commentary box, but I don't think we were on headsets at the same time.
No, that's right. Ian Soman, I'm sure if you're a 750 Motor Club regular will know he's usually here, but he is off doing work for charity with his swimathon, so we wish him well. I can't remember if that's today or tomorrow.
Good question. Let's say it's today and possibly tomorrow as well.
So that's who we were with, weren't we, at Pembrey?
He threw at me on Twitter yesterday that actually, he could have been here and done his swimathon in the Irish Sea in the lunch break, and that sounded like a terrible idea. Although the water is very calm today, and someone or many people have chosen a boat trip for this afternoon, which seems like a very great idea. Although you're going to miss all the racing out there. I wonder how far the P8 will actually stretch. Possibly not all the way out to there.
So how much longer have we got of this qualifying session? Checker flag's not quite out yet, so we've got a few moments to wait ahead of our first race of the day. All the championships or series that are here this weekend have had one meeting prior to Anglesey, which were either at Donington Park on Easter Monday, where I think it was pretty wet, and then at Croft, which was our last of the Alpha Live streamed meetings, or at Silverstone, which was a couple of weeks ago. So you can see there a couple of the Boxsters, a Cayman as well, on this grid for the All Porsche series, which has got 3 races over the course of the weekend. They've got 2 sprint races, one this afternoon and one tomorrow morning, and then one longer race, which is 40 minutes towards the end of tomorrow's programme. Everything that is here today is here tomorrow, apart from bike sports and road sports, although some of the road sports competitors will be in the 2-hour Tagua Club Endurance Championship race right at the end of tomorrow's programme. Both of today and tomorrow is in full for all the races. As you can see, we're on the international circuit this weekend, Johnny, which I think is for the first time for the 750 Motor Club. So this part of the track we can see now is new for probably most of our competitors. So
that's a first for the 750 Motor Club ever?
I think, not unless someone can correct me.
Well, we have people downstairs who might be more qualified to do that, but that's a surprise to me. I mean, I knew it was headline news that we were using the international circuit. There will be another visit to Anglesey later in the year when it's corkscrew time. Yeah. What do they call that short circuit?
Good question.
The shorter circuit. Coastal circuit, thank you. And yeah, it's interesting to actually speak to the drivers maybe at the end of the day who have experience of the coastal circuit as to which one they prefer, because you would think there is a chance to draft cars, particularly in saloons, down that Tom Price straight and into the hairpin, but there was suggestion from one or two earlier today that that's not always the case, and it's actually pretty easy to defend in there. But I think we've got a gaggle of cars. You can't necessarily defend from everybody all the time.
Especially in low cost, that'll be, particularly with their slipstream effect. Speaking to some of the drivers this morning, they were saying the corner, which is normally the corkscrew, which is Siemens, is actually much more difficult on this layout because it's sort of off camber, and then you're coming much quicker into the final corner than you would be normally. So they were saying, perhaps because, again, they were new to the circuit yesterday, learning it, but they reckoned it was quite a difficult layout, which may have its advantages and disadvantages, I guess, over how the racing will go. You see spectators up on the banks, and what a great view that is, Johnny, not just of the race circuit. You get the sea and the mountains in the background as well. Yeah, Snowdon is just out of frame, or is that the high peak just on the right? I mean, we've got a cracking view of it. If only I knew my Welsh mountains a little bit. I was only up it yesterday, so I should know. Really? Well, we went 3/4 of the way up on the train. We weren't feeling too fit. That's cheating. On the train? People are apparently this weekend there's the Snowdonia trail run, I think they call it. Right. Which is 100 kilometres running up and around the mountains. See, if Ian wasn't so passionate about swimming, he would have put his name down for that, I would have thought, today. Here we go. We're going to try and pick out Snowdon for you. It's less cloudy on top of the mountain than it was yesterday. The one on the right is slightly higher, so that's where my money is. But you should know it better, being actually atop it only 24 hours ago. Well, not quite that high. OK, 3/4 of the way up. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story, Josh. Come on. There's a Porsche that needs recovering, and that car actually has been parked there for a good while now, I noticed, and has been needing some help. So the longer that it's there, the less time they're going to have to fix it. Graham Hurd, I reckon, in his Boxster S. Come a long way to be here as well, all the way from Gravesend. Yeah, it's a bit of a trip, isn't it? For that to happen, yes. But hopefully there's whatever's wrong with the car can be fixed. I think Graham is new to the series, or new to me anyway. I wasn't at the first round, so he could have been there. But there's quite a lot of Porsche specialists here this weekend with so many entries and a lot of Boxster S's in particular. So hopefully whatever that problem with can be solved ahead of their race either this afternoon or if not perhaps for tomorrow, because they have 2 further races. Donington Park, they just had the 1 40-minute race, but this weekend 3 races, 2 sprint races. Some cars are shared, so I presume drivers will probably do a race each and then they share the car for the longer 40-minute race towards the end of tomorrow.
That would certainly make sense, and a good chance therefore to get some experience on your own, and then the different dynamic completely of needing to hand the car over in a fit state to the second driver.
But it helps when that happens anyway, doesn't it?
That's what you would wish if you've drawn the short straw as being driver B, yes. There's a safety car / pace car on the track now, so are they awaiting a dummy grid?
Yeah, we have a rolling start for our first race, which will be for the 750 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship. So once that box has been cleared, I suspect the bike sports will head out onto the circuit. So coming up just in a moment is the 3rd round of the 750 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship. So we're getting ready for our first race of the day on Alpha Live for this 750 Motor Club meeting. It's the 3rd round of the 750 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship, which is for bike-engined sports prototypes that run over 2 different classes. Class A are for the tuned engined machines and Class B for the standard engined cars. So let's have a look at the grid, which will see Charles Hall on pole position in his Mattel MC41R alongside his team boss Scott Mattel in the slightly newer Mattel MC41RR. On the 2nd row is Joe Locke in the Spire GT3 and alongside Class B pole sitter Leon Morrell in his Radical SR3. On the 3rd row we have a pair of Radical PR6s for Doug Carter and Alistair Smart. Row 3 is where we will find Philip Brown in his Radical SR3 alongside Ian Childs in his PR6. On the 5th row of the grid, Stephen Larkham in his PR6 alongside Stephen Bell's Radical SR3. And finally, at the back of the grid is Mark Boot in his Radical PR6. So we have 3 different chassis manufacturers here. As I say, the 2 Mattels on the front row of the grid, the sort of privately built car from the Mattel family by Scott and his father Ian. And Scott Mattel is there alongside Charles Hall in the slightly older, smaller engined car. So the MC41R that will be on pole position is a 1 litre car, but that means it's a lighter machine compared to Scott Mattel's 1340cc Hayabusa engined car. And Scott Mattel and Charles Hall have also raced as co-drivers in the past in the Praga Cup, and this season racing in the Bike Sports Championship, which Charles Hall won back in 2020, and Scott Mattel was a class champion in 2019. So they've raced against each other in the past, they've raced together, but this weekend they are on the front row, and you can see they look pretty similar, but helpfully, Johnny, they're in different liveries.
And if we're expecting them to get properly stuck into a battle out front, that's going to massively help us out to be able to pick them apart from a distance.
Yeah, at Donington Park, I think the first race Charles Hall had a problem, so he wasn't able to start. And it was actually Hector Hurst who won that one. He was ex-FIA Formula 3 driver returning to racing at Donington. But the second race, which was in the dry, which I'm told was a very tight battle between Charles Hall and Scott Mattel. It was actually Charles who took the victory there, and in qualifying this morning they were separated by just 0.24 of a second. So that bodes well. Then on the second row of the grid we get the only Spire, which is driven by Joe Locke, who had been a regular in bike sports recently, finished 3rd in the 2019 championship. In this type of car that his team boss, Tim Gray, won the championship in. And then alongside is the first of the Radicals, which make up the rest of the grid. And Leon Morrell, another former champion, he's on pole in Class B. Leon Morrell was the champion in 2021 as the cars go off onto their green flag lap. He starts 4th, just a couple of seconds off pole in, as I say, the Class B car, but the first of the mass of Radicals. You've got PR6s, the slightly older car, the centre seat car, and the Radical SR3. So, as I say, pretty good variety, even if the grid isn't quite as large this weekend as it would tend to be.
Nice tight times in qualifying between Joe Locke and Leon Morel, I notice. And actually, Doug Carter shouldn't be too far away when we get into the race either. They qualified as the first thing out this morning, bang on 9 o'clock, and had a 15-minute session. I'd imagine it wasn't as warm then as it is now, so again, tyre wear's not really an issue because it's only a 20-minute race, but you are going to have to manage things a little bit. And that's the purpose of this green flag lap as well, because they run on slicks, so they want to get the tyre temp up as high as possible.
So there's Charles Hall, who returned to racing a few years ago with the 750 Motor Club. About a decade and a half ago, he raced in Indy Lights, in Formula Renault as well in the UK before that. Had a long spell off and then returned to racing with the 750 Motor Club, first in a kit car, but more recently in sports cars. He's raced Aspire and then nowadays in this Mattel, which originally was Scott's car, but Scott's out in the newer car that starts behind in the works Mattel cars livery. There's car 5, Doug Carter, who's been racing with the 750 Motor Club in this Bike Sports Championship for a very long time now. And he's just ahead of Alistair Smart, who was the Class A champion from last season. So I suspect they'll also have a good battle as well. So as I say, it's a rolling start, so they'll be getting into 2x2 formation shortly, but at the moment they're still weaving side to side to try and get heat into their slick racing tyres. They are the only category here. Yeah, I've paused to make sure they're the only category here this weekend on slick tyres. So probably a bit more important, therefore, to get those tyres up to temperature. They are on an open tyre formula still, so you can choose your brand of tyre. But it should be a competitive race between the top two at the very least. Then we watch out for the battles through the pack. So the red lights will be shortly going on ahead of the 2x2 rolling start. It's a 20-minute race in for round 3 of the 750 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship, which gets underway with Charles Hall slotting then into the lead ahead of Mattel. But it was side by side behind for third, and Leon Morel's gone round the outside of Joe Locke to grab third position as they go up towards the banking for the first time. Morel then in that standard engined car on this first lap, Johnny Palmer, pushing on and gaining a place.
Nice little tussle in the lower order between a couple of the Radical PR6s. You can pick those out from the SR3s because the drivers sit right in the middle. And I was thinking from a visibility perspective, with a twisting, turning track, actually might be slightly better to be in a car where you have a good sight of inside lines, both left and right. Nose to tail then here between Leon Morel and the chasing Joe Locke. And this is the one that stood out for me from qualifying. I mean, you're talking about half a tenth between them, and I think that could be a race-long scrap. But Charles Hall getting the business done into turn 1 on this first lap.
So that battle for third continues, and going with them is Alistair Smart, who also got himself up a place at the start of the race ahead of Doug Carter. So Alistair Smart, the Class A champion from last year for those tuned engine machines, is there in 5th position ahead of Doug Carter, but their Smart locks up a touch into the hairpin there for the first time. And then they accelerate their way up towards the bus stops to complete the first lap. In qualifying, the pole position time was a 1:23 for Charles Hall, and Scott Mattel trying to go with him at this stage. Remember, Hall's in the slightly smaller engine car, but is lighter than Mattel's that is chasing after him. And then Leon Morel is there in 3rd place, about 3 seconds behind the top 2. But even that lap from the rolling start was a 1:25.6, so only a couple of seconds slower than the flying laps in qualifying.
Now, Alistair Smart in 5th, in danger here of becoming a bit too detached from the fight in the BSB category. So that's the one led by Leon Morel, with Joe Locke tucked in behind in that Spire GT3. But the first of the Radical PR6s is drifting away a little bit. I mean, the PR6s will be racing one another, I suppose, as well. But it'd be nice to at least flirt with an overall podium. Alistair Smart just jumping through shot there into the right-hander at Rocket. But 3rd place, still in the hands of the primer grey and green Leon Morel, with Joe Locke for company.
Leon Morel, a 40-year-old a carpet shop owner from Nottingham. He was the champion a couple of years ago. Formerly was a radio control car expert. So I'm sure you know somebody that might well know Leon, as they make their way down towards the hairpin. But yeah, he changed to car racing only a few seasons ago and immediately was on the pace, because you wouldn't think there is that much correlation from going from radio control machines to sort of full-size cars. But Leon's been really quick. He's there in third position. He's keeping the what should be a more powerful car of Joe Lock behind. Through turn one goes these top two cars. These cars that have so much downforce, Johnny, so quick through that first corner.
All I'll say about RC cars is look at Lewis Hamilton. You've seen those clips from Blue Peter, haven't you? He was a whiz at about probably 6-7 years old, and hand-eye coordination certainly will play its part. But Scott Mittell turning the wick up a little bit, 0.73 of a second adrift of Charles Hall. So that gap came down at the end of lap 2. Gap's obviously growing to the next duo, because Leon Morel and Joe Lock were not in the same league when it came to qualifying. And Leon Morel, his priority is to try and win Class B. And he should be capable of doing that. The problem is Joe Lock's a massive distraction here, and he will be driving in his mirrors this early on in the race, Josh.
The other problem for Leon Morel is there's only, I think, 3 entries in Class B this weekend, which means maximum points are not for offer within Class B, and the overall champion can come from either class. And currently he's equal on points with Scott Mittell, who, even though he may finish second here to Charles Hall, they'll probably be scoring more points, I think, for having a larger entry. So that's another thing to factor, obviously very early in the championship here, only for the 3rd round of the season. But when you're looking to perhaps win every race within your class to win the overall championship, you need sort of that larger entry to so you can score the points. And Charles Hall's now into the 23, so 1 minute 23.96. And there's Scott Mittell, I think, taking a slightly wider line there into the banked corner, the second turn of the lap, and then up towards Church Corner, which I'd imagine in these cars are probably flat out with all the aero pushing the cars down, and then this larger gap that's heading back to Leon Morel. It looks like Johnny's pulling clear now of Joe Lock in 3rd.
Yeah, he's gapped him, I think is the opportune phrase. The other thing I noticed was Scott Mittell with that wider line into the hairpin at the banking, just started to scrape the front splitter a little bit, and there's a bit too much suspension travel for my liking. It's not a clean and fluid run into the second corner of the banking, and it's important to obviously get a good exit there, because that will determine your speed through the fast right-hander at Church and then up the hill into the braking area for the sequence of corners at Rocket, which is where number 86 has just reached. That's Stephen Bell, running 9th overall in the SR3 RSX, and he has behind him Stephen Larkham in the red and white number 93. That's a PR6, so you can get a feel for the driving position of these two radicals, but not really separated by much lap speed, it appears, 5 minutes into the race.
Yes, Stephen Larkham, who we're looking at there, has come over from Northern Ireland for this weekend. He's only in his 2nd season of racing, having raced in the Irish Road Sports Series in the past. This is a 2009 model of Radical PR6 with the 1340cc Hayabusa engine. From RLM Racing, a self-prepared car for Steve Larkham. There we see Alistair Smart, who's there in 5th position, the 56-year-old from Hampshire, who's been racing for 10 seasons now. Originally in kit car style cars, but more recently in this Radical PR6, and is ahead of Doug Carter, who seemingly has been racing in bike sports since pretty much the championship begun. And he is there in 6th place. And then Philip Brown isn't that far behind in 7th position. He's the 2nd of the Class B cars in his Radical SR3, I should say, that's there in 7th position overall. Then this battle that Johnny was describing a moment ago between Stephen Bell and Steve Larkham. Again, Stephen Bell's been around the 750 Motor Club for a while. He was the front runner in the RGB Championship in the past. Swapped to bike sports more recently, and he's in one of the Tim Gray Motorsport prepared machines, just ahead there of Stephen Larkham, the Northern Irishman. So the SR3 there, which you can see is a right-hand drive car. It's not as good down the straights generally, but it's got more aero than the Radical PR6, which is more slippery, but doesn't have the downforce of the more modern Radical SR3. And are they catching Ian Childs, who's there in 8th position? On the last lap, they were a few tenths slower, but the gap at the start of the lap was 2.3 seconds. What do you reckon there, Johnny? Is that gap coming down?
Yeah, I think they're possibly working together to reel in Ian Charles. So there's definitely a nice little dice, almost a three-way fight for 8th, 9th and 10th. I'm intrigued by what's happening to Joe Locke, because Joe was able to keep up with Leon Morel for the first 5, maybe 6 minutes, but he's probably dropped away now in 4th position. Number 22, Spire. And then you look further behind Joe, and is Alistair Smart starting to become a bit of a threat? The lap times last time through weren't too far away, but was slightly in favour of Joe Locke. So the danger for him now is he's going to spend the next 12 minutes very lonely indeed in a wayward 4th position. There is time yet, though, to reverse those fortunes and maybe push on again to try and close in on Leon Morel. Gap at the head of the order is still very, very close, though, Josh, I noticed.
Yeah, they did identical lap times on the last lap, 1 minute 24.04. But talking about Joe Locke there, he did finish on the podium overall at Donington Park ahead of Leon Morel. So we can see the spire now of Locke, who did a bit of club enduro racing in the past. He's raced Honda Civics, but he's also raced bike sports machinery. Joe Locke, who was the 3rd in the championship in 2019 when he was racing a Radical PR6, but has acquired this spire for this season. And he turns up towards turn 1. He's done a personal best that time, 1 minute 26.6, but still slower than Leon Morel ahead.
Driving standards flag going out to at least one car, possibly more. It's the number
11?
Yeah, it was certainly 2 numbers that were the same.
Yeah, Phil Brown, that would be, if that's the case. So presumably that is for track limits, although I'm not really sure where you can exceed track limits and gain an advantage on the Anglesey circuit.
I don't know, racing drivers will find somewhere. You think it's definitely 11 rather than 77, which obviously would be a bigger story, because we're talking about Charles Hall in that case, the overall race leader. But I think I agree with you, it is 2 ones, so it's Philip Brown running 7th, but 2nd in his class. Behind this car, Doug Carter in the dark blue and orange. Doug's closer to Alistair Smart, I would say, last time I checked, and the lap time, yeah, is the best so far that Doug has set for that particular car, 6th place.
Now, Doug Carter was fractionally quicker than Alistair Smart in qualifying, but Smart got ahead at the start of the race. The leaders come across the line. That gap looked a little bit less. It was 1.2 seconds after 6 laps. And it's now 0.8 of a second. So for the first time, I think in this race really, the top 2 are separated by less than a second. So we'll catch up on those in a moment, where we watch this Radical PR6 battle for 5th position, head up towards the bus stop then again. There's Joe Locke, who I think he's pulling clear of them once more in 4th position. Then those 2 PR6s, those cars which are probably about a decade and a half older now. Radical sports cars who are based in Peterborough in Cambridgeshire. But now they've got a base at Donington Park as well. New owners as well to Radical over the last few seasons. But let's have a look at the 2 Mattels, Johnny, leading the race as Scott, the team boss, catching customer Charles Hall.
If you're just joining us, just over halfway through the first race of our broadcast today, so you've not missed much at all, the 750 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship. And do not adjust your sets. This really is Anglesey in May with beautiful wall-to-wall sunshine and a real good stonking scrap at the sharp end. Again, Scott Mittell a little wider, this time into the hairpin, as it's called, rather than the banking. So a wider line, which is what he prefers at the 2nd corner on this track as well. They're going to reach bus stop, the final corner on the international circuit, virtually together. I don't think that's 0.8 of a second anymore. And we'll get a clock on the exact gap in just a tick. It's probably half a second as they work their way onto lap number 8. It's 0.6, so marginally above that. Again, bumping from the front splitter of Scott Mittell's car. And he just drifted the back end out a little bit there as well. That will lose him time. Not a great start to this lap, lap 9, for the 2nd place man, Scott Mittell.
Yeah, well, I wonder if that's where the car's a little bit heavier because it's got a bigger engine. And then up the hill here, Scott Mittell perhaps can just reel in a little bit with, as I say, that slightly bigger, higher booster engine compared to the 1 litre Superbike engine that's in Charles Hall's car that leads the way. Scott Mittell sliding the newer machine around. The car ahead of him, Charles Hall's car, is the car that Scott Mattel was a class champion in back in 2019 when there was a class for the smaller engine cars. Nowadays, those cars are included within Class A, but there are, so I guess it's a type of balance of performance, the different weights that the cars have to have for the different engine sizes. But yeah, they do take very different lines. And perhaps that's because they are those slightly different cars, different characteristics, Johnny, where perhaps they just need to be driven slightly different.
Well, what it does for Scott is it straightens up the exit of Hairpin onto the straight with no name that runs parallel with Tom Price Straight. In some weekends is actually an additional start-finish straight, but we're using the standard one for both days this weekend. So Scott Mattel, I mean, the car looked on rails through Rocket on the last lap, but then he needed to put in a bit of corrective steering coming out of Peel. So I wouldn't say he's necessarily fighting the car, but he's pushing like crazy to stick with the race leader. And this dice, we trailed ahead because I felt Doug Carter was finding a nice bit of a rhythm. It wasn't a personal best lap time last time around for car number 5, but he is now right on the back of the car ahead, Alistair Smart in the yellow and black.
We noticed that Philip Brown was getting the driving standards flag. He's now getting a 5-second penalty board shown to him, so that will be for exceeding track limits. So that is something actually we'll have to keep an eye on then over the course of the weekend if drivers are going further than the white lines or going further than the curbs, because that is where track limits are picked up on Motorsport UK regulations. And Phil Brown, at this stage, it won't affect his result. He's there he is, a driver in 7th position, because he is further than 5 seconds ahead of the next car. But if he picks up more penalties, that will increase as this battle between the PR6s of Alistair Smart and Doug Carter have come right close together now. Obviously, with these machines, Johnny, they've got quite a bit of downforce, so overtaking not the most easy, obviously pretty short braking zones and then a bit of aero wash maybe as well.
Good point. Scott Mattel over the line. Gap this time around is 1.4. It was only a second last time, but it was 0.6 the previous lap, so he's lost 4/10 over the last 2 laps. And is that just how the car is evolving? The second of the Mattel MC41s, but the RR version for Scott Mattel, number 27, trying to stay onto the coattails of Charles Hall, but Hall is the man with the fastest lap, 1:23.96. And to go back to this relatively new MSA rule, that's no wheels over the white line permitted, isn't it?
It's a little bit foggy at the moment, isn't it, between the different series that have slightly different regulations. We haven't got
I know from an international perspective, you have to keep at least one wheel and tyre the correct side of the white line. I thought, though, well, looking at a car down the start-finish straight, exactly straddling the white line, 50% of the car either side of it. So presumably that's okay.
Yeah, we'll see if that's perhaps where it's actually being picked up. Because I guess that's really coming out of the final corner, isn't it? Up over the curbs, and then when the curb finishes, you're ending up over the white line.
Yeah. But using a bit of the track, just not the track that we're using today. And, you know, there is a white line there, deliberately. So that will be being closely observed. Not the place to do it when you've got 4 race officials on pit wall with a great view of that part of the track, in fairness. Anyway, we will keep an eye on not just this race, but the rest of the day as well. It's got worse, Josh, for the car in question.
Yeah, so perhaps it was that infringement we just saw then. It's now, so you have 5 seconds to start with, and then you add another 10 seconds on for the next penalty. So it's 15 now for Philip Brown, which could well adjust the results. If he does it again, it'll be another 15 seconds. And then if he does it again, it's a drive-through penalty. And then after that, you get excluded. So he might want to pay attention to the flags that our start line marshals are showing to him. But Philip Brown continues in 7th position. For the lead of the race, it's 1.6 seconds between Charles Hall and Scott Mattel. The fastest lap, a 1:23.96 for Charles Hall. And as it will be the case all weekend, that'll be lap records because of the championship not coming to Anglesey International before. A good battle just going across the line, actually, for that was 8th position, wasn't it? Because Steve Larkham has got himself ahead of Stephen Bell, the battle we were watching earlier, and has now closed in on Ian Childs. So a good battle for 8th position going on, as well as the top 2 just spreading out a little bit. Charles Hall just about pulling clear then of Scott Mattel. The 2 drivers have got very different backgrounds, really, because Charles Hall, who, as I said, raced in single-seaters as high as Indy Lights in the States about 15 years ago, then had some time off before returning, where Scott Mattel was a maths school teacher, won the low-cost championship, and then he and his father Ian thought, let's try and start designing cars, and that's what they've done over the last few years, and they've obviously designed some very quick machinery as well.
Back to a scrap we picked out in the opening quarter of the race, really, and it's still the fight for 8th position between Ian Charles and Stephen Larkham, and they're just working their way through the left-hander there at Siemens and onto the Tom Price straight, almost overlapping. The foreshortening of the camera is denying us of the fact that they are absolutely side by side here, and Larkham wide on the entry, tucks back in on the exit, but the next corner is a left-hander at bus stop, so that should favour Ian Charles, depending on how daring Larkham wants to be on the brakes. And I think he does the sensible thing for me, tucks back into line. Oh, big wiggle there as he just got up on the curve. That really unsettled the car, Josh. Yeah,
that was quite exciting, wasn't it? Getting a big old slide on in these types of cars. But Steve Larkham not giving up yet. The Irishman all over the back then of Ian Charles, another driver who's been racing in the Bike Sports Championship for a very long time. And Larkham's got a good exit out of the banking up towards Church Corner. He has to put the brakes on. He decides the inside line through there. Not the best idea. Charles runs out wide over the curb, so he's got not so much momentum as they head uphill towards Rocket. But I don't think, because of having to put the brakes on into that corner for Steve Larkham, he's not quite able to make that move work with just over a minute on the clock. The lead has crossed the line, though, with a minute and about 45 to go. So 2 laps to go for the leaders, which actually might be about 2.5 laps to go for this battle.
Now, as you know, I'm not a racing driver, but that, for me, was a better chance than Stephen Larkham thought, I think. If he'd been a bit more bold and charged his way up the inside of Church Corner, he might have been able to pick off that place. Just catching sight of maybe a half spin on that run through School and on towards Rocket. Side by side again, though, with only 50 seconds to go. Will the outside-inside trick work again for Stephen Larkham, Josh?
Well, again, he's on that outside line. We saw him get a big slide a moment ago as he came out of bus stop, but this time around the outside he brakes late, and I think that is going to be enough then for what is now 8th position to go the way of Stephen Larkham, and he goes up across the line then with a couple of laps to go, and he is 10 seconds behind Philip Brown. So that battle is actually going to be for 7th position, not unless Brown pulls out another 5 seconds in the final 2 laps.
Yep. Also, very good dice into Rocket, which I'd spotted down effectively the back straight, but it's very curvy for a back straight. And that is Alistair Smart, massively in defensive mode here to Doug Carter, who's been charging all race long. Only 5 seconds left on the clock. And where are the race leader?
Well, Charles Hall has gone through, and Scott Mattel I don't think his car is all that well. That was a very slow lap. You said you thought you saw a half spin a moment ago, so whether that was Scott or whether it was.
I didn't see it, but thankfully we've got another pair of eyes in the booth here. And yeah, Scott Mattel had the moment in second place. The checkered flag was being unfurled there, and I was about to say leaders, but we only had one leader because Charles Hall had gone across the line, as you said, but we are still racing.
Yeah, Mattel is slowing, so I don't think perhaps that spin was caused by a car issue as well. So whether Scott Mattel can get the car home, remember he is the equal championship leader with Leon Morel, and it looks like Leon may well pass him before the end of the race. Although not for a point difference because they're in different classes, but obviously if Scott Mattel can't get the car home, he will lose points, and this was a problem for Charles Hall at Donington Park as well, where he wasn't able to start one of the races. So these more highly tuned cars within Class A can be temperamental at times. So what has been a close battle for the lead, on paper, the result is going to show a very, very large gap for Charles Hall, who turns into the final corner now, and he will be our first race winner at Anglesey on this 750 Motor Club weekend. He wins the 3rd round of the Bike Sports Championship by a very long way. But who's going to finish second? Well, Johnny Scott Mattel is kind of back up to speed with Leon Morel behind him. Yeah, into the hairpin, so a couple of corners to go and flinging it around the outside. Leon Morel, he doesn't need to be that daring because the car he's just overtaken is virtually stopped. So Leon Morel into second position. Again, Scott Mattel having to try and do some sort of restart, reset, just to get the car home and on the overall podium. And Leon Morel, I bet, cannot believe his luck. Over the line he goes into second place. This result is going to be so misrepresentative of the race we've actually seen. That's why it's important to witness the race for real. Can Doug Carter make a change of result with 1 corner to go? He's close, isn't he, as he has been for the last couple of laps. Joe Locker's come through in 4th position. So for Scott Mattel, he hasn't actually lost any points in the championship because he's still 2nd in class as well. But for this battle, it is Alistair Smart who fends off Doug Carter. Now for 7th position, Phil Brown, who's only 8 seconds now ahead of Stephen Larkham. So he's not going to finish there in 7th position, even though he comes across the line now on the road. That position for 8th. On the road, but what will be for 7th in the results. That will go the way of Stephen Larkham ahead of Ian Childs. And now Stephen Bell, was he a lap down? Because he has not. Oh, here he comes now. So he could have had a chance to take 2nd place in class away from Philip Brown, but this very slow last lap means that's not going to be the case. And he goes across the line now. We lost Mark Boots somewhere through the course of that race, about halfway through. So there's a couple of drivers and teams and cars that are going to have to be refettled ahead of this afternoon's race. The bike sport's the only category that races on just today's programme. But Leon Morel there, a class winner in 2nd overall. He left big black marks on the road, didn't he, when he got sideways out of the hairpin. But he got that position done. So let's see if we can take a look at the results of the 3rd round of this M50 Motor Club Bike Sports Championship, which went the way of Charles Hall in the end by 30 seconds over Leon Morel, who won in Class B. In 3rd position was Scott Mattel after those problems late in the race. 4th went the way of Joe Lock ahead of Alistair Smart and Doug Carter. 7th, provisionally, will now be Stephen Larkham ahead of Ian Charles with Phil Brown down in 9th. And Stephen Bell was the 10th finisher with Mark Boot not making it to the end. So the drivers are heading down towards Parc Fermé now. With better luck, we're here from the top 3 with Andy McEwen, and perhaps we'll find out what happened to Scott Mattel, but he'll be chatting to him with Liam Morel and with Charles Hall. So let's head down to Parc Fermé and to Andy McEwen.
Well, excellent start to our day here at Anglesey. Then we've got the top 3 finishers pulling in behind us with Charles Hall victorious in the first race today. Charles, congratulations, perfect way to start your weekend here at Anglesey. Some race though, wasn't it? Because the cars behind were not that far away. You led the whole way, but you can never relax.
No, when you've got Scott behind you, relentless, you know, he just keeps going. But just spoken to him, and I think he had a little issue that just knocked him off. So yeah, it's good. The car, we're getting used to the car a little bit from Donington, but the car's absolutely awesome. And then so I need to go back in the gym a bit, because you're driving around here, possibly that has been one of my favourite drives I've had, just because the track's mega, the car was working, and it just felt brilliant, yeah.
What are track conditions like out there? Obviously dry, but the temperature climbing, and this place can get a bit slick, can't it?
It was just going off towards the end a little bit, so yeah, just learned something on the first time we've run on the Pirellis, and they are like brilliant. So yeah, I think I just probably a little bit on the pressures, because as it got to the end, if I was still having to push him, I think I was going to they were going to go greasy, yeah.
Thoughts now for the rest of the weekend, same again obviously is the plan, but it ain't going to be easy, is it?
No, I know. I've got one under the belt, so yeah, we've got to keep my head down.
Sounds like a plan. Charles Hall then victorious in our first race. Now where's Leon Morel got to? He is behind me. Try not to fall over the ball. That was a good start to the day, wasn't it? Leon is having a quick chat with the scrutineer. Sorry, can I just jump in for a second? Leon, congratulations, 2nd place there. Looked like being a podium from the start, but got to be happy that it became P2.
Yeah, I mean, obviously ultimately we're racing, so you see anyone in front of you, I'm desperate to catch him, but I was also conscious that Scott is not even in my class, so I didn't want to do anything stupid, and I could see his car was doing some at random corner exit, so we came into entrance to the corkscrew, let's call it, I don't know what the corner's called. I thought about sending it on the brakes then, but I thought if it cuts mid-corner, I'm just going to run into the back of him. So as we came down the back straight, I was mindful that he'd covered the inside, so I went deep and went for the switchback, and luckily, well, not luckily, but his car cut out on the middle of the apex. So yeah, it was good. A bit out of breath, hot, super hot, but yeah, no, that was good. I really enjoyed it. Pushing from the start flat out, car didn't go off, so can't ask for more than that really. Shout out to my mum, she's watching at home, so sorry you couldn't beat her mum, but next time.
Excellent stuff. Congratulations, Leon, on that 2nd place. And Scott Mattel, 3rd place finish for him on the podium, but must be a little bit disappointed with that. Quick word with you, Scott. What exactly was the problem?
I'm not totally sure, but I kept having to cycle it on the master switch. So I think there's probably a block in a fuel filter or something like that, and the ECU's too clever for its own good. So if it sees something below low fuel pressure, it thinks something's broken, so it turns itself off. So I was just having to sort of turn it back on and off every time. It did that. So
that is unfortunate. We'll catch up with you properly later on. But our next race then, about to go away. That is the Aim Shop Mazda 7 Championship. Cars already lining up on the grid, guys.
And the countdown has already begun for the Aim Shop. .com Mazda 7 Championship. The 32nd board about to be shown with Martin West and Daniel Sibbons on the front row of the grid. David Mason and Jonathan Lisseter, the three-time winner from Croft, on row 2. Ben Powney and Lucas Batt on row 3. And alone on row 4 is David Bowen. So we seem to be missing Simon Court. And completing the top 10 is Martin Shelton and Daniel Court. The red lights are on and go out. And it's a good start from the poleman Martin West. A dreadful start from Daniel Sibbons alongside. And a very good start from Jonathan Lisseter, the championship leader, who won all the races at Croft, which was a triple header. He is there in second position, and now challenging for the lead as he looks up the inside of Martin West, but he can't quite get through. West, the former low-cost champion, then leads the way with Lisseter there in second place as they head out of the banking and up towards Church Corner for the first time. And these low-cost chassis cars, which will give off a big tow now. We will see if Martin West can hang on as they get to the top of the hill into the left-hander at Rocket. A big moment there for the third-place car of David Mason as he got a little bit too close to the back of Lisseter, who's gone down the inside of Martin West, so it's side-by-side for the leader. Lock up for Lisseter, and both the leaders are going to go off the circuit here, so David Mason will come alongside. On the grass on the inside is West. To the outside now comes a slow start in Daniel Sibbons, but it is Lisseter who got through into the lead there, Johnny, but it was quite aggressive there.
Yeah, well, sometimes you've just got to force the issue a little bit with cars left, right and centre, and also if you strike right at the start and then can start to build a gap. It's only a 15-minute race, remember, so it is about trying to come up with a pre-race strategy and try and stamp that out as quickly as possible. So Lisseter leading the way for the first time down towards the hairpin, but in typical Mazda 7 fashion. Tyres still coming up to temperature, quite evidently, because you hit the middle pedal and there was a big lock-up from at least two of them.
Yeah, David Mason, who's got himself into second position there, almost running to the back of Lisseter. So the big loser there at that moment up at the top of the hill was the pole position man, Martin West, who has dropped to third position, but he's got a good run as they come out of the final corner. West was on pole this morning by nearly 8/10 of a second in only his second meeting in the championship. Former low-cost champion Martin West has upgraded his car to these Mazda MX-5 engine and running gear that these cars have, and he goes up the inside and gets second position away from David Mason, and he knows he needs to get through because the trip three-time race winner from Croft, John Lisseter, starting to pull clear then on this second lap of the race, but now into second has come Martin West. Can he hang on though by the time they get up to the top of the hill, because we know, Johnny, these cars give off a big tow.
Yeah, they're not particularly slippery through the air, and therefore if you can get underneath the car in front, then that really does increase your top speed. David Mason trying to do that, but so is the guy over his right shoulder, who is Daniel Sibbons, and if Sibbons can stay there, which he can't, that's where the cars ran off the road on the opening lap. Sibbons might have been able to stab down the inside at Rocket and then secure the move through the next right-hander at Peel, but he's going to have to wait at least one more lap in order to do that. Lisseter's not quite making the break that I had expected. We're going to head now down the hill, which is an awkward approach to Siemens, the left-hander. Lisseter just about finding the apex. Also a nice dice further back from this leading quartet for fifth position. David Bowen, Lucas Batt and Ben Powney all hard at it.
Yeah, David Bowen doing a really good job. He's pretty new to racing. I think he started here a year ago pretty much at Anglesey. A big slide there for David Mason, who's in third position up over the curbs out of the hairpin. But the lead of the race, Martin West, to the outside of John Lisseter, who defends as they come into the final corner here at the bus stop, and West is hanging on round the outside, sideways out over the curbs, but the inside line still had for Lisseter. Surely West can't go all the way around the outside at turn one, can he, Johnny?
He can. He's just gone out of view, annoyingly, but there he is again, and yes, keeping it just about on track inside the white line. Now needs to find the apex at the banking to make sure that Lisseter can't reverse the favour. And now Lisseter, if anybody's on the back foot, because David Mason got a cracking exit out of the banking and into Church Corner. So Lisseter to Mason is nothing at all. And Sibbons really needed to be part of this as well, because there must be about 10 car lengths now between the top three and that fourth place car. They're all trying to occupy the left-hand part of the circuit up towards the braking area for Rocket.
Yeah, Martin West knows what happened on the first lap and he doesn't want that to happen again, so he managed to hold off Liciter after that good move he did at the start of the lap, round the outside of turn 1. You don't see that particularly often, but Liciter managed it. And here comes now David Mason with a big bold move up the inside into Peel as he takes second position away then from Liciter, who was the champion a couple of seasons ago. In Mazda 7s, no, last season, 2022, when Liciter won the championship. And he's not running the number 1 this year, that's what confused me. But it's his traditional car number. This race not going so well. He won all the races at Croft. He didn't qualify particularly well, down in 4th place. Had that great first lap, but now he's starting to drop back. And there's that battle for 5th place that Johnny mentioned a moment ago, where it looks like Lucas Batter's got himself up into 5th position. So that's a really good effort there from Lucas, who his best result at Croft was a 7th position, but he's running up there in 5th now, ahead of Ben Powney, who's won a lot of these races in the past and does a lot of the promotion for the championship. And now Ben Powney is alongside Lucas Batt, heading up towards the left-hander at turn 1. Both these cars, out of a lot of them in the field actually, are run by Team Sellers Racing, and Ben Powney has got himself up into 5th.
Yeah, so Powney in the kind of copper-coloured car with the black underfloor, the orange roll cage, in fact 2 cars with an orange roll cage, which is awkward for car ID, but Lucas Batt with the brighter of the roll cages has now dropped back to 6th position and behind Powney. Car 37 and 66 almost as one. They've got David Bowen for company as well. I noticed Martin Shelton is getting larger in their mirrors, so not too far away from another 4-car Mazda 7 freight train to enjoy for 5th place. And Ben Powney is actually trying to check out as quickly as he can. As he goes into Rocket, frustratingly for him, you can see the other 4-car assembly, if you like, coming out of Rocket as he's going into it, and he would much prefer to be right with Daniel Sibbons, who is currently in 4th place. You don't get a lot of time to play with, though, in these races. The first lap or so, maybe lap and a half, is untangling one another from your starting grid, and then it starts to establish a bit of a rhythm. But Martin West at the moment has enough of a buffer. David Mason, having worked his way into 2nd place, trying to close in.
And they make their way then towards the end of lap 4 of this race. I thought Martin West ran a little bit wide there at the hairpin, so we'll see when they come back into view, and he locks up into the bus stop, which doesn't seem to have held him back too much. And David Mason there in 2nd position, and for David Mason, his best result at Croft was a 5th, so he'll be really pleased to be running there in 2nd position. Will Mason, then Liciter is there in 3rd place, but we've just seen, I think, a new fastest lap for the leader, Martin West, a 1 minute 42.32 as he pulls clear. Battles behind. There's David Bowen, who I said was going well. We didn't see him within the top 10 at Croft, but he's up there in 7th position, ahead of Martin Shelton, who did finish actually on the podium in the 3rd of the races in Yorkshire. So there, that battle goes through Church Corner for 7th position. David Bowen ahead, the business owner from Kent, so another driver who's had a long way to go, and another former radio control champion moving into car racing recently. But Martin Shelton goes up the inside. He brakes late. Does he get the car turned in enough though, Johnny?
Yeah, just about. The good news for him is the next corner is the long right-hander at Rocket, but he's run a touch wide, and that is going to allow Bowen back up the inside on the short run between Rocket and Peel. Good drive through the 2nd portion of Rocket. Almost, well, they were side by side again coming out of Peel, but it was front wheels level with Bowen's rears, and that's not quite enough for Martin Shelton. I was mightily impressed with the car style of Martin Shelton, though. Coming out of turn 1 at the start of this lap, he was properly with the tail fully out and over the curbs. And Shelton's got a quick car beneath him. He's going to try and move again at the inside of the hairpin, and will be able to pick Bowen off for the 2nd time on the same lap. Can he stay there this time?
We shall see. The cars this year are on different tyres, which perhaps don't give as much grip as the machines last year. And the cars have got a little bit more power. And I think this is really what's developing the cars into sliding around. And the drivers at Croft, at the very least, were very much enjoying that. It's certainly entertaining to watch, Johnny, isn't it? Side-by-side, sideways racing.
Jonathan Liciter having a bit of a nibble again on the tail of David Mason. But as Liciter was attacking there and had to get out of it, all of a sudden the pendulum swings in the favour of Daniel Sibbons. He's got a better run out of the banking and through Church Corner, but really 2nd, 3rd and 4th staying together. The quickest car out there right now is Lissitor in the green and white machine, number 71, last year's champion, and just trying to get his way by David Mason. If he could do that, I think he might be able to make a break for the race lead.
Yeah, I don't think the fastest lap graphic is quite accurate, because actually the fastest lap has just gone to Ben Powney in 5th position, a 1 minute 41.99, which is about half a second faster than anybody else ahead of him. So how far is he behind this group? About 2 seconds going on to this, the 6th lap of the race. But Ben Powney, who didn't have a great qualifying or start to the race, is coming strong now, which isn't particularly surprising for somebody who's won races in the category in the past. Now, is there a yellow flag up at the top of the hill there? Possibly in the background. Anyway, we can see if anything comes of that. But this battle of a second position continues. David Mason is certainly under threat from Lissitor. Mason is sideways out over the curbs yet again. That just seems to be a feature of this race, doesn't it? Seeing cars get very sideways. So 5 minutes to go. So that'll probably be about 3 laps for Martin West, the race leader. But for second place and for 4th position, Johnny, those battles very much coming strong.
Lissitor so wide coming out of the bus stop and now through turn 1. It's side by side between Powney and Batt in the background as well. Powney is able to fend off Lucas Batt for 4th and 5th positions.
Yeah, I think he was actually getting past Daniel Simmons,
no, you're right.
So he's caught that 2 seconds gap almost immediately, has Ben Powney. So how much further can he get? Can he get himself up onto the podium? Because he's not that far away from this battle for second. I think Simmons has got a problem though. He's slowing as they come out of the banking and up towards Church Corner. So a real shame there. You can see on your screens now a slowing Daniel Simmons, and Lucas Batt's lost a place actually to 99 Martin Shelton, but that may not last very longer. And for second, Lissitor's up the inside. He's tried this earlier in the race and run a little wide. This time though, he's got the car turned in much better than David Mason as Daniel Simmons pulls off the road into retirement, which is a real shame to start the weekend for him.
Hence my surprise that Powney was quite as close to Simmons as he was at turn 1, but that unfortunately explains it. It's gone all a bit Scott Mittel as it did in the first race for him. Similar place to be slowing as well, certainly coming to grief on the run towards Rocket. So we're left with effectively 3 now for second position. Martin West 2 seconds to the good at the start of this lap. It may have even increased yet further. 3 minutes and change still to go. And here into the hairpin arrives Jonathan Lissitor in second place ahead of David Mason. There is a significant chunk of debris though on the road, and that is at the banking, I reckon, rather than the hairpin.
I think it was a mudguard, which isn't the first time in these types of races you'll see one of those around. But that battle that we watched into the hairpin, I think saw Lucas Batt drop away. There's 2 laps to go, I reckon, for the leaders who come up across the line, and Powney has caught that group really very quickly. So a podium is on, and Ben Powney looks up the inside of David Mason, who just about holds that position. Mason, who we didn't see on the podium at Croft, he'd like to put that right this weekend at Anglesey. But how quickly Ben Powney has caught him, you'd think David Mason's position might be at risk here, Johnny.
Lissitor, again, fully sideways over the curbs on the exit of turn number 1, but did just about tidy it up enough to get good momentum towards the banking. They're now heading through Church Corner and into the hard stop at the top of the hill for Rocket. Lissitor, Mason in the all-white 43, and then Powney in the copper-coloured with black mudguards 37. Smart helmet design for Ben Powney as well, and he is homing in, certainly on a podium finish here. It might even be good enough for second, but he's going to have to get his sleeves rolled up in the remaining 2 minutes or so. Might be able to squeeze another lap out of it, of course, depending on where they are when the clock is very close to 0. But Powney now all over the back of David Mason. Mason didn't get the ideal exit out of Siemens. Will have to try and defend here, but it's too late. Here comes Powney up the inside of the hairpin to get third for the moment and to secure third position.
Yeah, so this second half of the race has gone really well, hasn't it, there for Ben Powney. So he's up into third, but is he going to stay there? Because David Mason, using the toe, makes his way up the inside here into the final corner and slops back ahead. If he can keep the exit pretty tight, he might be okay. But Ben Powney's just about got him. Oh, and he could just backed out at the last second, didn't he? Not to run into the back of David Mason, who defended towards the inside of the corner. But it's not over yet as we go on to the final lap of the race.
So Mason's missing one mudguard, front right, I reckon. Lister's just come across the line missing his front left. That went for a Burton last time down the straight between Hairpin and Bus Stop, and actually nearly flew in the direction of the third, fourth place cars. How much corrective steering was Jonathan Lister putting in there through Church Corner? These tyres are very durable, but it's a warm day out there, and it's almost as if the tyres are just right on the top of the track surface with very little grip on offer through the fast right-hander at Church. They're heading now into the slow left-hander, the first portion of Rocket, and this is the place that is most likely to change for me in the dying stages of the first Yokohama, the first aimshot.com Mazda 7 Championship, I should say. And these cars then running still in third and fourth places, but Powney looking the quicker. Is he running short of opportunities? Because this is the last lap now, Josh. Yeah, just 2 corners to go. There you can see Martin West on his way to winning for the first time in the Aim Shop Mazda 7 Championship. After winning the low-cost championship in the past. Second looks to be going the way of championship leader Jonathan Lister. The third position, though, Ben Powney gets a very good exit out of the hairpin. He draws up to the right-hand side of the circuit. We've seen Mason run wide here, but he's on the inside this time into the bus stop. But for the fourth round of the championship, the victory goes away of Martin West, who's very pleased with that. Second is Jonathan Lister, and David Mason, I think, is the most pleased of all, as he punches the air. He's on the podium, and he holds off Ben Powney after a great battle towards the end. What's happened behind? Well, for fifth position, it's just as close for Martin Shelton, who narrowly beats Lucas Batt. And then in seventh position was David Bowen, who's had a really good run. In eighth position will go the way of Daniel Court. And then for ninth position, almost side by side across the line here as well, Imran Khan in his first race in this car finishes ninth, just ahead of Ayrton Rogers, who has had a much better time here as well than at Croft last month. In 11th position across the line went Matt Groh, a gap to Peter Wood, who was involved in a battle with Ian Deves, who I think is another driver having his debut in the championship today. And then yet another battle across the line, a change on the last lap. Callum Barnes gets himself up ahead of Lewis Pentstone-Smith. And then Steve Gross, I think, is the one remaining car who's a little bit further behind than the rest. But great racing there from the Mazda 7 Championship, and proper racing as we expect from the 750 Motor Club. It's really only Steve, sadly, who had nobody to fight with, because you say the rest of them all coming across the line in gaggles and in various states of disrepair. But as you say, we're used to that. If you're not missing at least one mudguard, you weren't trying hard enough. Let's take a look at the results then for the fourth round of the aimshop.com Mazda 7 Championship. And it was Martin West who took the victory by just under 1.6 seconds over Jonathan Lister. David Mason, his first podium of the season, took third. Ben Powney, fourth after challenging Mason at the end of the race. Fifth, the rest of the rest, was Martin Shelton. After a great battle, he beat Lucas Batt and David Bowen. Eighth position went the way of Daniel Court, who also at the end of the race didn't have anyone to play with. For ninth, Imran Khan, he beat Ayrton Rogers, both taking their first top 10. Matt Groh was just outside in 11th. Peter Wood, Ian Deves and Callum Barnes completed the top 14. With Lewis Pentstone-Smith and Steve Groves, the two remaining finishers, with Daniel Sibbons with a problem retiring towards the end. But we get to enjoy the aimshop.com Mazda 7 Championship again tomorrow, so that's something very much to look forward to. And then sort of the sister series, the low-cost championship, we'll be seeing later on for the original Ford Crossflow cars. They have 3 races over the weekend, so slipstreaming action very much to be enjoyed around this layout. So in a moment, the top 3 will head down into Parc Ferme, and this time Andy McEwen will have a few more moments to be able to chat to our top 3, because we'll be going into a lunch break next, and then the racing this afternoon beginning about 1:30, and we have 6 races to look forward to then. But for Martin West, it was his first victory in the Mazda 7 Championship at Croft. He had a second and a third and a retirement with a problem. Obviously, those problems very much been sorted for this weekend. And coming out on top by a decent margin in racing like this, 1.6 seconds. And down with him in Parc Ferme is Andy McEwen.
Well, fantastic race as ever from the Mazda 7 Championship. Top 3 drivers behind me. Let's see if we can grab a word with our race winner, Martin West there. Martin, congratulations. Started at the front, finished at the front. That makes it sound a lot easier than it was.
Yeah, it all got a bit close up on, I think it was the first lap turn corner, you know, nothing malicious, it's just cold tyres and everyone got a bit closer. I think I dropped back a few places, but just try and concentrate, get your head back down, and knew it was quick in qualifying, so just try and replicate that pace a bit, and away we went, sort of thing. So, but like I said, they wouldn't go away. They were always just not far enough to be comfortable away, sort of thing. But no, enjoyable race. Yeah, enjoyed that one. Just a bit warm.
Yeah, everyone's saying that today. It's a bit toasty down here at the moment, isn't it? No, exactly. Much warmer than Anglesey normally is. Difficult to lead in a race like this, isn't it? Because you know that slipstream's quite strong. If you make a small mistake, then they're going to pounce.
Yeah, these are new tyres for this year, and we're all still playing to get them optimum. But after about 6-7 laps, they start going like jelly babies on the back, and I'm struggling, but luckily, obviously, they're struggling as well. So you're just trying to hope, manage it, just don't make a silly mistake. And that's just what it was today. Try not to make a silly mistake. But just like to say hello to my wife and my son and Tree, all helping out at home. They've just moved house. We got the keys on Friday, but I was allowed to come and play the weekend. So I'm probably not in the best books, but they're all back home decorating. So hello to you all.
Excellent. I think you've definitely got the right idea there, Martin. Now, Jonathan Lister was second place. Remember, Jonathan was the dominant driver last time out at the season opener at Croft. Jonathan having to settle for second place here at Anglesey. Some more good points then.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic result for me. I mean, Westy and Dave, they're just a bit quicker than us today, so we need to find something. But yeah, it just shows you how good this championship is. I mean, it's fantastic racing. So, if anyone out there wants to come and race, come and get in touch, because it's really good fun. So, there's good points for the championship. So, I'm really pleased.
It is good fun racing, although round here it's a bit narrow, a bit more technical than some of the other circuits that we race at. Does that require a slightly different mindset than usual? Yeah, you've got to be a bit careful. I think in the first lap I had to apologise to Westy because I went up the inside. I knew he was quicker than me, so I was like, I've got to get in front of him. So we both locked up and went wide. It was a bit mean of me, so I did apologise, but that's racing sometimes. But yeah, no, you do have to be a bit careful. The racing's really clean with these guys. There's a lot of respect, so it was good. Excellent. Jonathan Lister then second place in that race, and we're now looking for David Mason, who is down this way somewhere, I believe. There he is. Appears like magic. David, congratulations. Third place finish for you there. It was close at the end though. Yeah, it was. I knew Ben was going to push it all the way because he keeps saying he's down on power, but we know he's not. And yeah, it's really good. So yeah, pretty made up. So it's one of those, isn't it? The drivers like to whinge that their cars are a bit slow, but when you're out there racing, they're all so even, aren't they? Oh, I've used every excuse, like engine, gearbox, diff, you name it. I've used every excuse, but so far it's coming together. So hopefully it'll be good. So one more to go tomorrow, and then eventually venture home. So yeah, good. Third step of the podium, then. What do you think the chances are of getting up there into at least second place? I mean, you weren't a million miles off at the end, but it's finding a way through, isn't it? They've just Martin, they've just stepped up so much this year. It's so hard, but it's good. I mean, we went on a rolling road last week with James there. All the cars were identical, so that's what we signed up to do, and that's what we're getting. So yeah, happy with that. Excellent. Well, congratulations then on a podium to start the weekend there for David Mason. Martin West, though, victorious in our final race before lunch. Feels like we've only just got started here at Anglesey, but we've got a busy afternoon of racing to come, as I believe Josh was just explaining to you, with the Tagiwa Road Sports Series kicking off our afternoon's action. So go and get yourself a bite to eat, a drink, and make sure you're back here again for an afternoon of racing from Anglesey.